A few weeks ago, Honda launched a brand new CB350 for the Indian market, and I thought it looked absolutely awesome. It's a perfectly proportioned bike with some decent specs, and with it, Honda's goal is to take some of the market share of Royal Enfield on their home turf. But we've known that a new 350 single has been coming from Enfield for a while now, and this week we finally got to see it, the brand new Royal Enfield Meteor 350. Enfield have been super successful with their 650 twins of late, so in today's video we're going to have a look at the new Meteor and see if they've got another hit on their hands, and also find out if it can compete with the likes of the CB. But before we get started, if you're new here and you want to see all of the latest new motorcycle releases for 2021, then please do remember to hit subscribe. I'll be covering as many of them as humanly possible over the next couple of months, so be sure to subscribe if you want to see those videos as soon as they go live. Despite the Meteor 350 being the successor to the Thunderbird, it's an all-new bike designed from the ground up. That said, the engine specs are pretty similar, with a 349cc single-cylinder 4-stroke unit which is air and oil cooled. The Meteor manages a peak power of 20.4 PS, which is about 20 horsepower, and it produces it at 6,100 RPM. A peak torque of 27 Nm arrives at 4,000 RPM. It is of course fuel injected and paired with a 5-speed gearbox via a revised clutch, which Enfield claim has a lighter feel at the lever. Fuel capacity comes in at 15 litres, which ought to be ample for a relatively small displacement engine, although it is a bit of a step down from the Thunderbird, which offered 20. The new frame is a steel twin downtube design, and it has a seat height of 765mm, which is fairly low and ought to be easy to flatfoot for all but the shortest of riders. A curb weight of 191kg is fairly manageable too, whilst the ground clearance of 170mm provides enough space to take on some rougher roads. Suspension is fairly simple, with a pair of right way up 41mm forks with 130mm of travel, and there are twin shocks at the rear with 6-step preload adjustment in order to compensate for carrying a passenger and or luggage. A 19-inch wheel at the front should roll well over uneven surfaces and also adds a bit of an old school look, whilst braking comes in the form of a single 2-pot caliper on a 300mm disc at the front and a 1-pot caliper on a 270mm disc at the rear. ABS comes as standard and is dual channel, meaning that the front and rear brakes are modulated separately. This is the only rider aid though, with no traction control present on the Meteor 350. But there's some neat tech elsewhere, with what they're calling a new tripod mounted in the cockpit, which offers navigation prompts that are powered by Google. Simply pair your phone and set your destination, and the tripod offers a nice clear readout of where to turn next. This sort of tech is becoming increasingly common across the whole motorcycle market, with the likes of the Triumph Trident also getting a similar system when it was launched last week. But it's awesome to see it included on this bike as standard at a much lower price point. I think they've made a really nice job of the implementation too. It looks super clear and easy to use. There's also a USB port for charging your phone, and the main dash, which sits alongside the tripod, looks well equipped with an analog speedo around the outside, combined with an LCD display for all of the other readouts. Rounding off the tech, there's an LED daytime running light at the front and an all-LED tail light at the rear. The main headlight beam and indicators remain as traditional bulbs though. Enfield have clearly put a lot of work into the styling of the new Meteor, and it makes for a decent looking package with a similar overall aesthetic to the CB350. But I have to say, in its basic fireball spec with the red tank, red rim tape and the cast wheels, it looks extremely similar to the Triumph Street Twin. The more you spec it up with the Stellar and Supernova models, the more chrome, paintwork and accessories that you get, and it starts to take on more of a cruiser vibe. Personally, I like it most in the stripped back fireball form, although you will have to forego some comfort. There are a decent selection of accessories for the Meteor, with some really nice looking exhaust options, a large screen and a fly screen, some different seat options and covers, and some hard luggage. In terms of price, there are 3 versions available, starting with the Fireball at 1.75 lakh, the mid-spec Stellar at 1.81, and the range-topping Supernova at 1.9. In UK terms, that's about 1,800 quid for the Fireball, up to 1,950 for the Supernova. Now, I wouldn't normally expect a bike like this to come to the UK, but I did message Royal Enfield to ask for more details, and they said that a European press launch will happen later this year. I'd expect the prices to be much higher, but it does seem like we'll see the Meteor 350 on British roads at some point next year. I'll follow up with more details as soon as they're available. But realistically, most of these will be sold in India, and it's the Honda CB350 that's recently set the benchmark for features and performance in this segment. On the face of it, they're pretty similar, with a single-cylinder 350cc engine through a 5-speed gearbox. The frame, suspension and brakes are all roughly equivalent, and the looks aren't a million miles apart either. But there are some areas in which the Honda excels. Firstly, it produces 30 Nm of peak torque as opposed to the 27 Nm of the Enfield, and it produces them 1,000 RPM lower in the rev range at 3,000 RPM as opposed to 4,000. This should mean that it'll feel gutsier in the mid-range, such as when you're riding around town, and it also weighs 10 kilograms less at 181 kilograms curb to the 191 of the Enfield, which should also contribute to a zippier feel on the throttle. In terms of tech, the Honda gets switchable traction control, which might not seem absolutely necessary on a 20 horsepower bike, but it could offer some reassurance to newer riders in challenging conditions. And you can always knock it off if you feel that it's too invasive. The CB also gets LED lighting all round, including some neat looking ring style indicators, whereas the Enfield just gets an LED on the DRL and the tail light. Although Enfield promised that they've lightened the clutch on the Meteor 350, the Honda gets a genuine slip assist clutch, which pulls the clutch pack together under load, meaning that lighter springs can be used to give an easier lever pull. The slipper tech also means that the rear wheel won't lock up under aggressive downshifts. All that said, you might want to go for the Enfield if you're a shorter rider with a more accessible seat height of 765mm to the 800 of the Honda. And although the CB350 does include phone connectivity with voice commands, I think that the navigation system on the Enfield actually looks easier to read because they've used the separate TFT screen. So if you often ride to new locations on unknown routes, this could be seen as a massive plus for the Enfield. On the face of it, that seems like a lot of extra features for the CB, but the starting price is a decent chunk higher at 1.85 lakh to the 1.75 of the Enfield. So ultimately, it comes down to whether you think you'll use those features to get value for money. So there we have it, a quick run through of the specs of the Meteor 350. I must admit, I was surprised to hear that there'll be a European launch, but the 650 twins have been so successful here, with the Interceptor now becoming the best-selling motorcycle in the UK, outdoing the BMW 1250 GS, which has held that title for some time. So perhaps Enfield are onto another big seller here, but I'd love to hear what you think of it down in the comments below. It certainly looks like it'd make a great little bike for beginners, or a second bike for the more experienced, especially if you want a bit of a retro look and feel. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you're new here and you want to see more videos like this, hit subscribe and I'll catch you next time.